So I actually wasn't planning to originally cover the coronavirus because I have a rather large China video in the works, and I figured I'd just stuff it in there. But it really is becoming its own story, isn't it? I've been following a number of people with a number of different perspectives on the coronavirus. I was watching Styx like 2 weeks ago when he was talking about it back before nobody else was talking about it. I heard it from him first, and he basically got the jump on the story like a week before everyone else. I gotta say, Styx is he's a smart guy. I don't always agree with him, but he knows what he's doing. I also watched V's videos, which are coming from the point of view of a doctor, since V's a doctor. And they're actually worth watching. He includes tips on how to like keep yourself clean and keep yourself safe during a quarantine situation. But I'm going to come at it from a different perspective. And my perspective is somebody who has actually experienced Wuhan. Now, Beijing is a relatively normal Western-style city. It feels like a Tokyo or an LA or a New York. You know, just a very metropolitan, modern city. Aside from the higher than average amount of smog, you wouldn't really be able to tell that you're in China necessarily. Well, I mean, of course there's Chinese characters, but you know what I mean. Wuhan, though. Wuhan is a proper central Chinese city, and it is also disgusting. And I think we have to talk a little bit about Chinese culture to really understand where the coronavirus came from. First of all, a lot of people in China, it doesn't matter whether they live in the city or live in the countryside, they do a lot of their grocery shopping daily, and they do it at basically the Chinese equivalent of farmers markets, though they're not nearly as clean or as healthy as farmers markets. The Chinese belief is that if you eat fresh food rather than stuff that's refrigerated or frozen or whatever, it's better for you. And you know, there's probably some actual truth to that. We certainly have a huge problem with processed and preserved foods here in the West, that's for sure. But you have these open air marketplaces that have been operating for like hundreds or thousands of years or something. You know, basically since the formation of the Chinese people, you know, since the founding of the city. And you go down to that part of town, and it's not just like vegetables or fruits being sold out of the back of a cart or something. It's like open air butchers. And how it works is they have this food hauled in from the countryside with no regulatory oversight. Like there's no quality control on this food. It's not like our farmers markets. You know, you go to a farmers market in Canada or the States, and you can kind of expect like organic food or healthier food, stuff that was just picked that day. You know, it's not like that in China at all. They just haul it in from wherever, and then you go to whatever shop you want to go to, and you say, well, hey, I'd like, you know, a chicken, and they'll go, okay. They grab a live chicken, and they'll go out into the street and they'll butcher it in the street. So they'll like behead it. You know, they'll bring the cleaver down basically on the same concrete that you walk on. And then they have these drains that are set up. So basically the filth of the market just kind of rolls away into a drain somewhere on the street. There's no modern sense of cleanliness. The people there basically act like germ theory isn't a thing. It's almost medieval, the way that they handle things. Like you would expect this to be a scene out of like a European Dark Ages city. But no, it's modern China. These butchers, they don't clean their tools, they don't wash their hands, they don't care about sanitizing anything, and neither do the people that buy these things. You know, like if you want a bag of chicken's blood, because Chinese cooking actually does involve chicken's blood, believe it or not, they go, okay, they'll just give you a bag of chicken's blood, and here you go, and it's like just tied off at the top with like a rubber band or something. They give it to you, you take it, no one's washing their hands, no one cares. And this is how the food shopping for millions of Chinese people happens every day. So it's no surprise to me personally that the coronavirus or other things like SARS or even back in the day the Black Plague, these all basically came out of China. I mean, when you live like that, it becomes obvious, right? And we can definitely lay this at least partially at the feet of Chinese culture, and definitely part at the feet of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, the Chinese government, basically. And it's because, firstly, the Chinese government has been pushing traditional Chinese culture as a viable alternative to the decadence of the West, when it's really not. Like, I know, for example, I've read articles where students graduating high school in China have to learn, like, it was either 20 or 200 Tai Chi moves, because Tai Chi is, like, a traditional Chinese health and wellness martial art. And they're really pushing, like, this Chinese culture is better than Western culture because it's our culture kind of deal. And that actually extends into Chinese medicine. So you have a lot of people who, here's a good example. In China, everyone spits everywhere. Doesn't matter. They'll spit on the floor in a restaurant. They'll spit on the street. They'll spit in your workplace. Might even spit in your house. They don't care. And it's because in traditional ideas of Chinese medicine, If you're building up phlegm, that stuff is bad for you, so you spit it out, and then it's basically a cleansing ritual. Unfortunately, the modern idea of germ theory is that when you spit like that, you're spreading germs everywhere. But you tell a Chinese person this, and they'll say, well, it's my culture, and that's that. You even get some people who say that you're bigoted for preferring, the scientific method over their cultural ideas of what cleanliness is. So you take this traditional Chinese medicine, focusing on like the key energy of the body rather than the actual scientific health of the body. You take all this traditional Chinese cultural BS. You combine that with a cultural impetus to eat literally everything everywhere, because China, more than other parts of the world, I would say, has a history of extreme famine. So they definitely developed cultures where they will eat any possible animal they can get their hands on. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how gross it is. It doesn't matter how disgusting it is. It's traditional Chinese food. Chow down. That's when you start getting those weird pictures of like people eating deep sea creatures, or they're eating like bats, or they have like monkey brains or something. Just crazy stuff that like is probably actually pretty unhealthy for you, all things considered. But hey, it's their culture, right? And then you have the third factor in all this, which is Wuhan containing a Chinese biomedical facility where they were actually experimenting on some pretty deadly pathogens in there. And I mean, who knows? Who knows if it's the case that the deadly pathogens were, accidentally or purposefully released from this place. Everyone seems to be thinking that's the case. I mean, it is quite funny that the logo to the facility is literally the same thing as the Umbrella Corporation, which, if you don't know, created the zombie virus in Resident Evil. So there's definitely some good memes coming out of it, but it's a bit more serious than that. I know there's been some 4chan speculation that this is like an American CIA thing, like the Americans rolled in, and they decided to send somebody undercover down to like the Wuhan wet markets with some like new agent or something, and they kind of like planted it somewhere, and now people are getting sick. That's probably a bit of a reach. However, did it come from this biomedical facility? And probably. I would just hazard a guess. I don't think it was purposeful. I think it was like because of these Chinese standards of what cleanliness actually is. What probably happened is somebody just stupidly didn't wash their hands or accidentally had something on their lab coat, and then after work went down to the market and got their food. And now like you have many people infected. And by the way, it is many more people than the Chinese government's willing to say. Last updated 32 minutes ago as of this recording, total confirmed cases are 2,886, with 2,825 of those in China. Then you have 8 in Hong Kong, 8 in Thailand, 6 in Macau. Then it goes down. Canada has 1. There's 1 guy in Toronto who was just in Wuhan. There's that one woman in France who she flew from. She bragged about it on social media. She went from Wuhan to Paris, and then she specifically like took a bunch of antiviral medications that she would pass through the screening, knowing that she was infected, just to get like social media clout. Like, I don't know if breaking a quarantine and spreading a pandemic internationally is a crime, but to be frank, it ought to be. But in any case, I'm sure we've all seen like the various videos. I'm sure we've all seen Medicare Stream and the other videos out there of these insider reports coming in from China that no, it is in fact not 2,825 confirmed cases. It is tens of thousands of confirmed cases, or hundreds of thousands of confirmed cases. There are videos floating around of people falling over in the streets. There are videos floating around of just dead bodies lining up in the hospital hallways being covered by sheets, and hospital staff working for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours straight. And if they stop working, they'll be branded by the government as a traitor and punished accordingly. There's a serious horror show going on in China right now regarding this virus, and of course they're not going to tell us. I mean, come on, it's a communist state. They're not going to put out something that damages the face of China on the international stage. Usually when something like this happens in China, what happens is they decide to basically blame the foreigners first. So like if something goes wrong in China and it's at least like halfway plausible, they'll blame the Americans or they'll blame the Japanese. They'll ramp up anti-Japan sentiment or something in their official publishing. They can't do that though. It's a bit far-fetched. It is a bit far-fetched to think that the CIA might have gone in and planted this thing. So instead what they do is now the centralized Chinese government, they're blaming the local Wuhan government. And let's be honest, if you like watch the news after this all quiets down, you will probably see a few like local officials be charged with corruption or something. And this is the problem with a giant state-run bureaucracy, especially if it's medical. You don't want to be the one that reports the problem, because then your head is the one that rolls, because it was your incompetence that let it happen. So you have coronavirus breakout in Wuhan. If the Wuhan medical establishment reports it to the governor, those people they get executed. Basically, they might go to jail for life, but they'll get executed. If the Wuhan governor, the local governor or mayor or whatever, reports it to the centralized government, they're going to get sacked. You know. So if the playbook for an emergency in Chinese culture is to not rock the boat, be stoic, and just soldier on, especially under threat of life imprisonment, death, losing your job, whatever it happens to be, then you're going to end up with a people that just ignore problems until they get way too big. And that's what we have. That has basically been the history of China for thousands of years, whether it's their own ancient infighting back in the day, whether it's their complete exploitation by colonial powers, or whether it's the communist era. When you hear those heartbreaking testimonials from like doctors or nurses who are saying it's far worse than the government says it is on TV, and to not trust the official party line on this, I am at least somewhat inclined to believe them. I think this is a much bigger deal than SARS is. It is already reaching the total confirmed amount of infections that SARS did over 6 months, and it's been like 2 or 3 weeks. And even the Chinese government is saying that it's quite bad now. Like directly, they're just saying, nope, this is a terrible situation. And if the Chinese government, which has every incentive to save face, is actually saying that it's bad, then it's bad. I don't think that this is, the zombie apocalypse. I don't think that we're going to lose most of human civilization over this. But I think this is a far bigger deal. And to be honest, I think this might be the one of this century. You have to remember, in 1820, it was cholera. In 1920, it was the Spanish flu. And now we're at 2020. There seems to be a major pandemic every 100 years. And, we are kind of overdue for one, frankly. I don't care how much of a world power China aspires to be. If they can't even wash their own goddamn hands or their own goddamn food, if they're still believing in these basically folk tales from thousands of years ago, not simply as moral standards to drive their lives, which is fine, but as actual tangible scientific truth, they're not fit to be a world power. Let's be honest. And you know what? If there's gonna be like a new fucking outbreak every 5, 10, 15 years coming out of the filth hole that is China, maybe we should just like isolate them from the world stage. Like, hey, until you guys learn how to be clean and not infect the entire human population with your bullshit, maybe you should just stay there for a while, all right? Because personally, I don't feel like dying to super cholera because somebody decided to go and butcher a goat in the middle of the street and then dance around in the blood or something. Jesus.